set to start this afternoon. I'm sorry for the slight delay, a bit of a PC malfunction, but we're back up and running. So this is Graham. Graham's going to run through the features of the FS5. It's also going to do a bit of comparison for us with the FS7 because they're kind of similar feature sets, and I know a lot of people are debating which way to go between the two. We've also got Richard from Atomos over the back there. He's going to do a bit of compatibility with some of their external recorders, which is also quite popular with this sort of range of cameras. Can be as interactive as you like. If you have any questions as we're going along, do fire them out. Graham will do his best to answer them. If it needs any further investigation, we can try and find out and hopefully answer it before the day's over. But I'll hand over to Graham now. If you've got any questions, as I say, just fire them out and we'll do our best to help. Thanks a lot.
Hello guys. Graham Howe, cameraman. I am probably, I'm not going to say an expert with this camera because it could be further from the truth. I've had it for a whole day. And that whole day I was walking around with my twin daughters, toddlers, trying to film them, you know, just to see how it handled. Varying levels of success with the camera. I'm going to bring Richard in a bit later. He comes up with a few solutions, I think, to make this camera that little bit extra that possibly makes it worthwhile if you were interested in buying one. I'm not saying it's not worth buying, I'm just saying the difference could be what these guys can offer towards the camera to make it slightly more in line with this one. I might repeat things a bit. I've been given a PowerPoint and I've sort of had to try and manipulate it around the time that I've had the PowerPoint and the time I've had with the camera. Just on, I'm going to say a pricing thing, and this is sort of the thing that surprised me mostly about the camera, is that I'll go without lenses and I'll talk to you a bit more about why I say that. Without the lenses, 3,795. Without a lens, 4,799. So roughly £1,000 difference. I'm an owner operator. I own an F5 kit. I predominantly work with my F5 kit. I do a lot of work with that. When this came out, I was slightly sort of upset. It came out not that long after I bought the F5. I looked at what this camera could do and thought, oh, it does a lot of what my F5 can do. And I thought, oh, have I sort of spent a bit more than I needed to? In hindsight, I'm happy with what I've got. It's got great functions. I don't work for Sony. There's no one in the room from Sony now, so I can say exactly what I want. But that is that they are a company that are always updating their models, which I think if you're the kind of people that are going to go out and buy a kit, it makes it tricky. You know, you do think, oh, you know, should I hang on? The problem is you could always hang on. But this has been out just over a year. I think about a year or so ago I was doing demos for them, and then they brought this out, and I thought, oh, you know, I know how I felt when I got the F5 and they brought this out, and I thought if I'd have bought an FS7, what would I think about this? Well, to be honest, they're chalk and cheese. They're different cameras. You know, that's the first thing to sort of be aware of. I will probably repeat that throughout, bear with me a bit, but they are different bits of kit. So that's the first thing to consider. Credits, a few things that I've worked on the last year or two. I'm fairly busy, fairly lucky, touch wood. Do a lot of sports stuff, do a lot of single camera, do a lot of OBs. So I'm probably quite lucky in that I sort of dabble in everything. Most people these days tend to sort of pick an area that they work in, stick to that, get plenty of work doing that. I've always been one that I like to sort of keep my options open. You know, if I can get a bit more single camera, happy to do that. I get booked to do the Rugby World Cups, the Football World Cups as an operator on the OBs. I get to do that. You drop out of one, you move into another. Works very well for me. I would say it's how I'm most comfortable, but having bought kit, very conscious I have to earn money from the kit as well. It's not just about having it sat there as a doorstop or a toy for my daughters to throw around. So, predominantly, I mean, you guys will probably know what you need to know about this camera. We will do some little comparisons, but predominantly we are talking about this. It's the FS5. It's the new XAVC Super 35, you know, large sensor camera. If you think it's going to be running the same as that, like I say, you'll be in for a bit of a shock. Doesn't quite work. It's a great camera. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a good camera. I'm actually tempted to buy one as a B camera because I do a lot of jobs where they want a second camera. Of course, they don't want to pay for a second camera. They just expect you to bring it, and it doesn't really work if you just, you know, spend a lot of money on kit and you're taking it along for nothing. You want to have some return on it. At this price, with an adapter, I could quite easily incorporate this as a second camera. It's the same codec, or same family of codecs, I should say. It's not the same codec. Again, we'll come to that. But it would work better for me as a second camera. It does have some limitations. Again, like I keep saying, that possibly would think, that's not great as a second camera. But then I currently run a DSLR as a second camera. So it has hardly any functions anyway. You know, you pretty much point. Hopefully you've exposed it in the right area, you know, and you hope that it will record something that someone later on is not going to phone you up and say, what the hell have you just given me as the B-roll footage? Like I said, I had this camera for a very short period of time, so I can't, I'll give you an honest opinion. Whether if I had it for longer, that would slightly change for the better or for the worse, I don't know. But certainly the time I spent with the camera, which was a whole day effectively, I was reasonably pleased. What I would say is I used this lens, which is the kit lens that comes with the camera. I don't think that it's being too out of order me saying it. I'm just being honest because ultimately I'm being paid to be honest. I don't want to bump into any of you guys in 6 weeks' time and you say to me, you never said that it didn't do this or it would do that. I personally wouldn't touch a Sony kit lens. They're not a lens manufacturer. You know, I mean, I brought it up in the first one of these we did this morning, and the guy from Sony, you know, rightly said, oh no, we do actually have 40, 50 lenses in our range of lenses that we can offer for these cameras. Yeah, but you're still not a lens manufacturer to me. You're a camera manufacturer, you're a TV maker, you're not a lens manufacturer. I think if I turned up on a job with Sony lenses, people probably wouldn't say anything, but someone in the know would say, oh, surprised you haven't got, you know, at least Canons on there, Zeiss's, whatever, you know. But I think if you turned up with Sony primes and things like that, people would think, not the greatest lenses, not a lens manufacturer, no history of lenses, you know, it's something that they've latterly moved into with their DSLRs and now these cameras. The camera that I took out, like I say, was this one. I wasn't overly impressed with it. It was f4, it's the kit lens, f4. Admittedly, through the zoom range, it was f4. And I went out on a day, it was certainly brighter than it is today, a lot brighter than it was today. And we were walking pretty much similar like this bottom corner here. So in and out of trees and in a field. And I was even out in the open area, I was whacking in gain, which, you know, I wouldn't expect to do. You know, like I say, it wasn't a brilliant sunny day. I'm not going to say it was, but it certainly was nothing like it is today. And I was whacking in gain, and I was thinking, oh, have I got this set up right? You know, I sat there for a bit. There's no ending. Right, no, it's set up. It needed a bit of gain. Again, it could be because of the lens. I then put one of my primes on there, a little 24mm Nikon prime. It was fine. Didn't need any gain. So possibly the lens. They would probably disagree and say it works well with the lens, with the camera, and it does. It talks to the camera. It does all those bits that you would expect it to do between two compatible products from the same manufacturer. But they're not broadcast lens people. So, like I say, if I was going to buy the camera, I'd spend the money on a Metabones or something like that to get it on one of my lenses on there, because I know that my lenses will do exactly what I want, the way that I want it to work. By the way, any questions, do throw them my way. I don't know everything about the camera. Like I say, I've had a day's play with it and a load of bump given to me. But like I say, the day I had is probably a day more than 99% of cameramen have had. So what we sort of want to touch on, there's bits of it that we won't touch on. I won't bother with the menus too much. We are running slightly behind with time, partly my fault, partly the group before's fault. The menu system, it's the same as if you're comfortable around Sony cameras, you know how their menu works. It's a little yellow icon, it moves down. It's exactly the same in these. The functions aren't exactly the same. They're never going to be exactly the same. It's a lesser camera than that one. We'll look at the features and benefits, external features, indicators, connectors. Connectors are quite important. Doesn't have everything you possibly would expect of a broadcast camera. Do a little bit of a comparison between the two. Picture profiles, not a great deal you can say that you probably again don't already know other than what it has got. We won't look at what's in the box other than a quick look in the brochure. I'm sure you can find online if you are that interested, or speak to Ben, one of the guys from ProAV. They'll look after you. They're fantastic. I am, I'm quite local to here. Never really knew that they were so local to me. Used to buy stuff online, get it shipped out here. Looked one day where it's coming from. It's here. They're great. They'll look after you. Give you a good price on anything you want as well. And that's not a shameless plug. That's just me being honest. So, the sensor that's in this camera is exactly the same sensor that is in that camera, the F5, the FS700. FS700, though, to me is a major backward step in a camera now. We've moved on from that camera. It's still a half-decent camera. I remember on Sky OBs, they were using them all the time for the rugby matches, for the hard hits, get a bit of slow-mo on them. They were great. But now, these cameras do continual slow-mo. That camera to me is dead and buried, but it's the same chip. But what it also tells you is that chip isn't the newest chip out there, but it's a chip that works very well for TV capture on these kind of cameras. It works very well with the codec as well. It says on the side it does 4K. In truth, it does quad HD. It doesn't do full 4K. It doesn't do DCI 4K. It does TV 4K. Now, if I was to put it politely, I don't think you would use this on a high-end job. The jobs that I would want it for are purely a lock-off B shot. That's all I'd want it for. I don't want it, for my main camera to go out there and shoot stuff. If I wanted that, I would go with a higher-end camera. If, however, you did want to get some higher quality 4K, quad HD, whatever you call it, because in this camera it's only 8-bit, you'd have to speak to Richard. Richard's got a solution for that. So just something to bear in mind. So as not to put you off purely and simply because it's only quad HD and people say it's only 8-bit, 420. There are ways around that. It's just in the camera, on the media, it will only do quad HD. So just something to bear in mind. Like this camera, it uses the Sony E-mount system, which is, how can I put it politely? It's a very good system for attaching pretty much any lens to a camera, because the short flange distance, I think it's 18mm between the front, the element and the front of the camera. It works, you can put any adapter on there. Now, when I say any adapter, you can go on eBay, you can buy an adapter for 20, 25 quid. You can buy a Metabones for a couple of £100. I've got an Optitech, which is admittedly for my F5, but it's up to £1,000. The world's, you can spend what you want on an adapter. What I would say is, as with everything like that in TV, buy cheap, buy twice. I think if you go for a really cheap adapter, it's cheap for a reason. It's going to be what that will do for your images. I've seen stuff, just online, I've not ever come across it myself, but I've seen stuff where, the edges are soft. That's because, a £20 adapter has been, that's not me. It's that, isn't it? It's that this one, I think. You would definitely see the difference. Whether you'll see £800 worth of difference, I don't know, but I don't think any of us would ever want to deliver footage that a week later you get the dreaded call that, what was wrong with your camera? And you go, nothing. What was wrong with your lens? Nothing. Well, there's something not right with the image, and you think, £20 adapter. I would always spend the extra. My wife hates it. We've got twin babies, and I think I've spent 25 grand in the last 18 months on gear, because I never go for the cheaper option now. I've learnt my lesson. I've bought things in the past, and 2 months later you think, it doesn't quite do what I want. What I needed was it to do this, it to work this way. So if you were interested in this, and it's the same with this camera, just go with a decent adapter. You're spending, not small sums of money. You're in the thousands. So another 200, 300, 400 quid on just double checking that your images are going to be there exactly how you want them, do it. You know, you'd be a fool not to, you know. It has 14 stops dynamic range. Again, read what's on the box. It's 14 stops of dynamic range in S-Log. It's not in the regular codec, you know, in the regular system setups. It's purely in S-Log. Now, working with this camera in S-Log is not like working with this camera in S-Log. They're two totally different things. You'll be tripped up no end by this in S-Log. In that, I'm not going to say it's easy, because I never like using S-Log and things like that, because I always panic that, again, if I'm not on it 100%, if I make a slight error, if I look away and I've knocked something, you know, what I'm going to give them is not going to be bang on. With this, you're taking that to another level of actually having to be a bit more careful. So again, we'll get to that, but just something to be aware of. In HD, it's 10-bit 422. In 4 QHD, I'm going to keep trying saying QHD, it's 8-bit 420. Like you say, that's not the end of the world, is it? You can get around that slightly. And to be fair, with what Richard's got, I probably wouldn't buy this if this was going to be my workhorse camera without probably talking to these guys anyway. Because I think what these guys will give you will enable this camera to be worth its weight in gold. You know, it really is good, and there's not much weight, so there's not much gold. But it would be great, you know, with what he's got there. Unfortunately, it's not quite ready yet, but that's all to do with the fact this camera's, I think they're just shipping, aren't they now? I think, you know, if you've probably got one the next week or two, you are working with a pretty early doors, not prototype, but one that's in 3-4 months will have a load more functions and a lot more ease of use with it. Sorry guys, I'm just... look at all the Sony bump. It comes up with the usual comments, run and gun friendly, blah, 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 excellent handheld. It's great, it's small, it's light, it's very easy on the arms, it's very easy to walk around with all day. What I would say is personally, as someone that's probably not the slightest of people and fairly strong, fairly comfortable, I don't have a problem with the camera being fairly heavy. In fact, I prefer it. The lighter the camera, the harder it is actually for me to operate. I'm sure it's the same for all you guys, because any little bit of movement in your body just goes straight through you, straight through this. So as much as people like Sony will keep sort of throwing at you that, oh, it's really light, it's really good, it's this, it's that, I don't necessarily think light is always great. You know, a bit of weight to the camera actually will help you handheld. You know, it really will. On a tripod, it's neither here or there, you know, but handheld, I think it's one of those things, take carefully, because trying to operate this, I mean, I had it walking around and, you know, I noticed that if I stumbled slightly, the camera was everywhere. With one of those, you're a lot more solid, it's a lot more comfortable. In some ways, it's a lot more user-friendly, because it's not one thing that you're constantly thinking about, oh, I've got to hold this steady, oh, I've got to hold this steady. When the camera's got a bit of weight, it half does that for you. With this, you are slightly fighting it. I mean, it's perfectly balanced. So if you get it there and you are comfortable, the camera's perfectly balanced. I've put various lenses on today. The balance stays around the midpoint, but I've not put a big broadcast lens. So it's no HJ lens on there or anything like that. But with all the lenses that we've put on it and played around with, the balance is fairly central. You're not fighting it either way. Another thing that takes your concentration when you're working. Any questions? Do stop me. I mean, like I say, you know, I will waffle, and then all of a sudden it'll be time for me to go and pick up babies. A RAW option is coming in the future. I don't know when. I'm sure it will be first quarter of next year. I think when this camera came, it didn't come with a RAW option, which was the extension unit. The extension unit that comes with this camera is not, doesn't interface with this camera at all. So it is going to be out of the HDMI, isn't it? And I think that's...
You can't take RAW out the HDMI, but what Sony, if they do it, it'll probably be more like the FS700, where the FS700 just sends out RAW data on the HD SDI input, because it's a 3G.
Right.
So they would probably do it on the SDI output as a bit stream, I imagine.
Yeah, and that's where you come in.
Yeah.
with a big smile. With a big smile. One massive plus with this camera that we've all found today, and like I say, it's the first time that I've actually had a chance to use it, is if you want to put it on one of these. We've got one on there, that's what was going off a minute ago. The battery's probably run flat, but it fits on this really well. So that's one thing that it's good for. And you know, when we've done this, pick it up, have a feel it. It's not heavy. If you were to put an FS7 on one of the larger gimbals, if it even fits, you're going to struggle massively to hold a shot. You know, I know from the jobs that I do handheld, a 1 minute shot, invariably you're holding the camera for 10-15 minutes, just waiting to get there. I'm not saying you'd want to hold this for 10-15 minutes, but you're not going to be struggling like you are on one of those. So putting it on there, it's great. Same again, these little jib arms. Again, I quite like the thought of having one of those on a job as a B camera. Just adds a little bit of something. You're never going to do it with my F5, with an FS7. With one of these, it's going to go on there nicely. How much are the jib arms, roughly? A couple of £100. You're adding so much to your production value, and that's what it's all about these days. People want to see all these fancy moves, fancy shots, walking around, down low, up high, chasing people. You're going to struggle with the heavier cameras. Like I say, on these cameras, they're almost made for it. So again, I will say things that I don't like about it, but one massive plus is this FS5 fits on all these, I want to say cheaper, but one-man band, units that you can get. That's the problem. I mean, everyone wants these jobs. No one wants to pay for an assistant or a sound man anymore. So you turn up on a job, you've got to do it all yourself. No one appreciates. I've got a mate that, just bought one of these the other week. And he sort of said to me, he goes, "Oh, I didn't realise how heavy it was." Well, there you go, "Oh, I didn't realise how much setup time there was." Well, when you're screaming at me, because I'm doing stuff on my F5, now you see what I mean. I say to him, I can only go as fast as I can go. I can only format the cards as I go. So it's one of those cameras I think you can pretty much get out of the box, turn it on, start shooting. It's a very modular design. You can strip the camera down to what we've got on here, which is just a lens and the body. We've put the monitor that comes with the viewfinder effectively up on there, so you can monitor what you're doing as you're shooting. But you can take everything off. You don't need any tools to strip it down either. It's all done by 1/4" threads. Don't need any tools. They're all just little finger twists. And when it's stripped down, that bit of body there comes under 1 kilogram, 850 grams, which is nothing. Like I say, handheld, probably a bit too light for me, but when you're putting it on extra bits of kit, it's fantastic. You have no problems balancing, holding it for time, but as a camera, it is very, very light. And the good thing is, the viewfinder can go in various positions. You could probably even screw the viewfinder straight onto the camera body. It's extremely modular. You also don't have to go with just the Sony products. You can strip those off because there is a record button on there. All the menus are on the camera, so you can strip that off, and I think you can, Shapes, the manufacturer of this one, but Vocas, all those people, you can use those. Hello.
Could you get that viewfinder
hood
on there? On that
I don't think so, and because I asked that this morning, and it doesn't come with a hood either. And that's something that slightly surprised me, but it doesn't, because the cable comes straight out the bottom of it. But I thought that, like on that one there,
a whole hood or just a whole viewfinder? I mean, just take another.
I would have thought not, and I would say definitely not, because it's a different size connector. Because my F5, when this came out, I said the same thing. I didn't really like the viewfinder. In truth, I've actually grown to quite like them, so that's one good thing. But I thought that I could possibly put my F5 viewfinder on there, but again, it's a different connector. Why they're not the same connector is beyond me. But yeah, no, you can't. So
it's just better with glass, your glasses and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've got a PXW-300, and if you could just take the viewfinder off that.
Put it straight on. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I don't know why they've done that, and like I say, it was a bit of. Again, it's one of the things that slightly put me off buying one of these as well, because I wasn't for that kind of. I mean, I didn't spend a lot more on my F5 kit. In truth, at the time, by the time you got all the other bits,
Yeah.
There's a few thousand in it, and I thought, do you know what? I'd rather have a camera that when I pick it up, I'm 100% happy with, rather than 80% happy with. And that's not knocking this at all. You know, I wouldn't have minded one of these. I bought the F5 because clients I had spec'd it, you know. And you sort of say to them, well, why does it have to be an F5? Well, we want to do continuous slow-mo. I think we can do that on this. But, you know, oh no, we prefer the F5. We know the F5. You know. If they're happy to pay me, then, you know, it's not a problem. There are 3 options for stop, starting, recording. Handle, very useful hand grip, and here. So, like I say, there are no short options here. You know, you can stop, start it, however you're operating it, however's comfortable. You'll find somewhere to easily stop, start the camera. It's the hand grip. I'll just show you there. Fully rotatable. The other good thing about this is it's connected to the camera via what you can fit an ARRI rosette onto. It's not an ARRI rosette, but there's 4 screw holes to add an ARRI rosette. So if you then chose to put the extension arm like on the FS7 or a Vocas or a Shape one, there's no problems for that. You can just add those straight onto the side of the camera. The connector for this is a 3.5mm jack, Lanc protocol. So the good thing about that is if you didn't like this, you could just plug in an old bebop or something like that. Also, the other good thing about that is if you put it on a jib arm, you can just get a 3.5mm extension, and then all of a sudden you've got a control either via this or a bebop where you can zoom a lens on the end of a jib arm. You know, same, you can put it on here, work wonders. You know, again, it's just the little bits that they have thought about. The hand controller is good. I'm going to say it's good. It's a bit plasticky. I don't think it would take too many knocks, but then if you own the kit, I don't think you're going to be looking to drop it. So just one of those things to be aware of if you hand it to someone else. I never let anyone else hold my camera. I figure if I'm going to break it, I'd rather it's me that broke it than someone else. I'm still going to have to pay for it. But it's a very good multi-function control, well worth having a look at. Again, may or may not be to your liking, but it moves around. Again, it's here. I think it does limit quite where you are. You know, it goes along with the run and gun style, but not always 100% sure that it really works as well as they say it does. But the zoom's fairly smooth. I'll talk about something else later with the lens, but it's got a very cool function that this zoom enables with prime lenses. So it's something that's quite good. As I said, this enables 4K production. You can shoot on these cameras in 4K. It's a 4K sensor. Whether you actually use it that often for that, I don't know. I doubt it very much. I've shot a handful of 4K things. They do tend to be for Sony direct. They do tend to be with that camera, so you know pretty much they're not going to go anywhere except for internally. I was fortunate enough to go out and work on the World Cup in Brazil last year, and the last week before the final I did some 4K stuff for them with the F55s, just cutaway stuff, and you know there is a market for it. I think it's probably more going to be in archive at the moment because there's no way of really showing 4K. It's something that people ask for. There probably are some benefits of shooting in 4K on certain things, like I say, archiving, if you want to crop images, things like that. But if I'm honest, if I had £1 for every time I've been asked about 4K, I'd have about £2 or £3. So I would say at the moment, concentrate more on what this can do for you on a daily basis rather than a potential basis. You know, as with all of us, if you're buying kit, you want to make money from that kit. You don't want to buy it saying, right, if I buy this bit of kit, I'll get loads of 4K work. It probably won't happen because there's not loads of 4K work out there. Like I said, it only does quad HD, so it's not full 4K, and it only does that up to 30 frames per second. So that's the most that it does. And in HD it's 60, apart from in the cache for the high-speed stuff, which we'll come along to. It's 8-bit in 4K, 10-bit in HD, 422 in HD, 420 in Quad HD. Slight comparison between the two cameras. We spoke about actual use of the camera. I would be a lot more comfortable with this on my shoulder than probably that on my shoulder. There, I'd probably be more comfortable with this camera, and that I'd be happy, but I don't think I'd be overly comfortable with that on my shoulder. It's a small camera, you know, you've got to work where you could get the viewfinder easily. For me, it's just not what I'd want to put on my shoulder, but then that's the way that I work. The memory cards, that's probably where the first of the big jumps in terms of deciding if you're going to buy this camera over that camera. XQD Media, I've got a price from these guys, they sell it here, going on 64 gig cards. For this camera, it's 28 quid. For this camera, you're talking 185. Now, not the worst sums in the world. My F5 SBS cards are £600. So that's another jump again. I thought these were cheap, and all of a sudden you come down to these and you think, no, that's cheap. What I would say is, if you were to buy SD XC cards, which is what it has to be, and the reason I know that is because I just took along on the day that I had it, just regular SD cards, it would only record in AVC HD, it wouldn't record the XAVC. So that was something to be aware of, that no one at Sony, well, they gave me the card and it was the wrong card, and I spent age. You think they told me it didn't do every function, but I thought at least it's got to record XAVC. But it was the card, so you have to get an XC card. But if you were filming 2 days with a client and then they want to take the cards away, I would be less worried about giving them £28 cards. £200 cards, £600 cards, I probably wouldn't want to let out of my sight. A, they'd damage them, or B, they'd just lose them. You know, and what do you do then? Do you have a stand-up fight with a client that, you know, you owe me on top of the day's work £1,200 worth of cards? Or if it's £75, £80 worth of cards, you'd possibly take the hit, possibly they'd be happy to pay you for it. You know, if they lost it, damaged them, whatever. So again, it's something worth thinking about. Of course, there are limitations because of that. So if it's a choice between shooting certain stuff, the fact that it is on an SD card, there are limits that you don't get on this camera with this card, but it's a price thing. You know, you're not going to get everything on this camera that you're going to get on that camera, or else I wouldn't be here. You know, you just buy that, there'd be no point in, you know, that would be the camera to buy. There are limitations to it. This camera also doesn't have a Cine EI mode. It will never have a Cine EI mode. So that's something to bear in mind if you are the kind of people that are going to shoot log, S-log. I personally have done a couple of jobs S-log, scared me senseless because I wasn't at any point in the day before, the drive down there, the drive home, and the constant 6 weeks after till I saw it on TV, you know, not worrying about it the whole time that, oh, I might have slightly under or overexposed it beyond, you know, repair. This camera uses a system which I think we'll get to, actually we'll come back to that, we'll get back to that. Like I say, full HD, this will give you, the FS5 will give you 240 frames in full HD as opposed to the 180 frames that this will give you. The difference being that will give you continual slow-mo. That is a cache. Cache is a pain in the backside. I don't care what anyone says, you know, and I brought it up earlier and they said that it's not a limitation of the camera, it's a limitation of the cards. Well, it's a massive limitation because a lot of the work that I do a particular job for the England rugby team when they play the games at Twickenham where I'm covering anything that moves and a lot of it in slow-mo. And quite often I'll see someone come around a corner with a flag, you know, I think, oh, I'll get a bit of that. And then I'll see, you know, Will Carding or someone think, oh God, I'll get a bit of that. If you've hit record, it's caching, you're waiting. By then, he's been and gone. That is really frustrating. You know, like I say, I think being unfair in saying that, it's really frustrating. I mean, I think it's more of a consumer sort of thing really. If you're going to have slow-mo, you need proper slow-mo. If it's the fact that the cards aren't really the right cards, then I probably would have thought about sticking with XQD cards. I don't know, I'm not an engineer, I don't know if it's what's inside here, I'm sure it's something to do with that. With this though, all right, it's less, it's 180 frames. Personally, I never shoot anything over 100 frames because there's never the time to actually play the shot in. You know, it's just too long, it doesn't cut well, it doesn't work well. But with this, you can do 180 frames continuous. I can record, stop, look, record, stop, look, record, stop. You know, you can just continually do that till your card's full. So that's a massive plus for this camera over this camera. If you're not going to do lots of slow-mo, it's probably something you need never even think about. I shoot loads of slow-mo. You know, don't particularly like it all the time, but they love it. You know, companies love it. 240 frames, you know, like I say, I don't think there's any time I've ever been asked to go anywhere near there. I've tried doing 150 and they're saying, oh no, it's too slow. Speed it up a bit. We'll go back. What I'm going to just quickly talk about is the S-Log, sorry, that we spoke about before. So the strength of using S-Log on this camera is the way that you can monitor it. You can monitor it very easily. You can set up monitor LUTs and you can just check all the time you're comfortable with what you're shooting is going to be usable at the other end. This camera doesn't have any monitor LUTs. It doesn't come with them. It comes with a viewfinder gamma assist, I think it's called. And how that works is, on here, it will still look S-Log, but what it does is it gives you a Rec 709, so a regular TV signal exposure index. So you know that if the zebras are coming on at 70%, you're pretty well exposed and it will be safe, it will be there. But that is the only way that you can monitor the exposure and how good your S-Log shot's going to be. Now that's great, except for one slight problem with S-Log, you always want to slightly overexpose. So again, and you haven't got to be off by much in S-Log on these cameras for it to be not unusable, but pretty disappointing. So it's something worth thinking about in that if you do buy one of these and you think, I'm going to shoot loads of S-Log, get your head around how it works exactly. Get it and nail it, you know that when you turn that camera on, and you start recording halfway through the shot, the important shot, you're not thinking, oh, I think I'm a little bit off here. You know, I don't think this is exactly what I want. On these cameras, you can monitor it really easily, really well, and you'll be confident that what you get is what you wanted. With this, I would just take a couple of backward steps, calm down a bit and think, right, am I happy? Look around the frame, you know, am I happy? Because if you're not, if it's overexposed, come the edit, come the grading, it's gone, you know. And I haven't had any experience of that, because like I said, because of the cards that I had, it's just what I've been told by the Sony guys, that it does need nailing. Now, again, you say, well, why haven't they put the monitor LUTs in? Again, I'd say, look at the size of the camera, look how much you're paying. Well, actually, I'd say, look how much you're paying. It's only £1 difference. But just be aware that, you know, you're not going to get every function out of that camera into that, or else there'll be no point in no longer producing that one. XAVC, it's the current codec of probably all the broadcast cameras that Sony produce. There are varying levels, it's a family of codecs. There are 3 levels. There's the S, which comes at the lower end, which is in the A7S and the sort of the DSLRs. Then the top end is the XAVC-I intraframe, and this camera's got a new, well, not a new one, but another one, long got, XAVC-L. Differences between the two are, this is very efficient on the camera side of things. On the post-production side of things, slightly more tricky. This one, long got, takes the first frame in its entirety. We look in this room here. Anything that doesn't move, fine, stays there. The next 11 frames, 12 frames, then it's looking at the differences, and that's what it's changing. For the camera, it makes it very efficient. It makes it work very well. Works very well with the codec. Makes the chip work really well as well. But with this camera, it's every image, every frame is going to be in its entirety. You know, it takes a look at everything in the frame on every frame. So again, you're going to get better quality out of this camera and I would say this is a lot less or a lot more post heavy. So just something to be aware of. It's not me. Now, Sony brought this codec in to deliver for productions that wanted to go over HD resolutions in 50 and 60 frames per second or above those, and also bringing in the 4K world that we're now entering. Like I say, I don't see a lot of it myself, but you probably do see a lot more than I do. But it was with all that in mind that productions were thinking about moving into that area. So the XAVC was primarily developed for 4K or above HD, 2K, 4K in mind. Also to deal with variable frame rates, the compression helps with variable frame rates and things like that. So again, and progressive capture at 50p and 60p. We'd probably use 50 here, 60 in the States. Like I say, the memory cards, that's what these are. You can also use memory sticks that are Sony's own, but the SD card seems to be the common one used. In Ultra AD up to 100 megabits per second, and in HD up to 60p at 50 megabits per second, 422 10-bit. I assume, like I said before, that is, yeah, that will be 8-bit 420. Like I say, don't be fooled. If you put in a HC card, I think like I did, you won't be able to record in XAVC. It will only do AVC HD, which was a precursor to XAVC, but it is a lot lower codec. So you are not going to get the same results from that. I spent a day recording with it. It wasn't too bad, if I'm honest, but I think it would have been noticeably different had I been able to use the XAVC codec. Oh yeah, there are dual slots, so you can put 2 cards in. You can either dual record or you can relay record, you know, all the usual things you'd expect from one of these cameras. It does all that. So again, out of one of these cards, or if you go up to, what's the biggest card that these guys do, a 256, you're probably talking 6-7 hours with a dual slot recording. So again, you're going to get a lot of recording in your day's work, which is where this camera comes in really good on the run and gun stance, is that, you know, what with the batteries and the cards, you can pretty much shoot all day. You know, if you're doing a job where, you know, you're literally expected to just capture anything that moves, you know, you're outside at the House of Lords and they want to keep getting stuff and people are coming in and out, you know that this camera with those cards and these batteries, you're not going to be constantly panicking that, oh God, my card's going to run out, oh God, my battery's on 20%, I've not even shot anything yet. This battery here is a BPU 30, it's the kit battery that comes with it, and that will last between 2 and 3 hours. Now, if you bought one of those and a BPU 60, it's up to 5-6 hours. BPU 90, I think it's the same again, you know, up against like 7, 8, 9 hours. You know, you're getting a lot of use out of it. I think in practice, probably you wouldn't get that long, but on the test, I mean, the day that I took the camera out, I had one battery and I was using it in the morning at home. We went out for about an hour or 2 in the afternoon, not constantly shooting, but then I did some more in the evening. It was only halfway down. I hadn't really been pushing it, you know, but the battery did last, you know, did everything that I wanted it to. One problem I'll remind and tell you all now, and you'll see what happened here. When I got the camera out on the Sunday morning, I had it down like this, and like I say, in the manuals and everything, it shows you people holding it here and all that. Every time I brought it into my body, and I was like, oh God, you know, I said to my wife, geez, we just picked this camera up from Pinewood and I've broken it already because it had been on the back seat, and I was like, oh God, what am I going to tell them? And I was sort of fiddling around with the cable, checking it was mounted and couldn't get it enough. And then I did that, and I thought, oh, stop doing it. Basically, this has got an OLED viewfinder in there. They don't have the longest life in the world, so a way to save them is, if your eye's not up against the cup, it turns off. Not much use, you know, I mean, I deliberately bought an LCD viewfinder. I don't like OLEDs. I don't like the fact if I put it down there and my eyes away from the cup, the camera, the viewfinder turns off. But that's just one of the things that it does do. So you can either turn it up like that, the monitor will stay on all day, or you can turn it off in the menu. I mean, I would probably never operate the camera. No, I definitely wouldn't. In fact, I would never operate the camera like that. It just wouldn't be comfortable. You put it there. I think it's very hard to have your left eye open as well, so you're pretty blind as to what you're doing. Happier there, you know, even, like I say, working from that. What I would say is, I've probably got slides where we come to, so I may repeat myself, but the peaking function on this is fantastic. Totally confident with it. You know, you think when you start moving down to this end of camera that possibly the peaking function's not going to be that good, because I mean, rightly or wrongly, my F5 never has the peaking off. Two assignables that I use, zebras and peaking. You know, I'm constantly just tapping those, but the peaking pretty much never goes off, because putting primes on and things like that, you know, you're never 100% sure if it's in focus. With the peaking, you're still not 100% sure, but you're 95% there. You know, you're pretty confident that what you're shooting is going to be in focus. So with this, I tried it. I wasn't 100% sure what it would be like, but it was bang on. Got home, put it on the TV, knowing where I'd kept the focus for a lot of it, deliberately pulling it just to see when I got home, bang on. Not a thing wrong with it at all. So again, it's not a shameless plug, but from that's one of the things that I really, really liked about it. And it's an important thing for me using the camera. It's not, like I say, along with the weight, it's just another thing that I don't want to be concerning myself with. There's enough to be going on in the frame without thinking, oh God, you know, is this soft, is it sharp? You know, we've all done shoots where we've got back, you know, I did a shoot in Italy, shot an interview, flew out there just for an interview. Back focused the camera, set everything up, did it, had a little monitor. They had no monitor with the camera, so we had no monitor to look at, just a little one on the side of the camera in the viewfinder, soft as anything. But in the viewfinder, and I'm thinking, looked fine, looked totally fine. You know, you could not tell. Got back, and you just say, well, what can I do, you know?
Yeah, the worst is when you've got a presenter who's supposed to stand at a podium.
That's right.
Doesn't.
Yeah, yeah.
Those walkies.
Oh. Yeah, exactly, yeah. And you'll be literally, I mean, look, you'll spend all day doing that thinking, is that it? Is that it? Is that? I don't know. I mean, like I said, the peaking's not going to be 100%, but you're going to know if you're in that ballpark. And certainly it's going to be good enough. I do the football for BT regular basis. First thing I do now with an OLED viewfinder, I get peaking in on it. Because even though it's an OLED, because it's in colour, you're just looking at it and you're thinking, is it? And then something you know, something will catch your eye behind what you think you're foot sharp on, and you think, flipping now, he looks sharper. And then you start panicking. With the peaking, you can just, you know, take your mind off of it a bit. I mean, I started wearing glasses the last year, which probably doesn't help, but yeah, it's just one of those things that, again, I really liked about it.
Is the peaking in all different colours?
Yeah, I think it's not in. It's only in 2 or 3 colours though. It's not the full like white, yellow, red,
white,
blue. I think it's only in 2 colours.
Red
I
and
think.
white.
Yeah, it's but it worked. You know, it worked. So you know, I mean, it's one of those. Yeah, cause I always like blue. So I don't think it had blue, but I always used blue. But yeah, it had it there, and it, you know, like I say, it worked, which was a surprise. A pleasant surprise. Now, like I said, I wasn't 100% happy with the lens that came on the camera. It is the kit lens. Sony do a massive range of lenses. Like I say, I'm learning about these too, because I would never think to look at these lenses, let alone use them. The front row, I think pretty much are the E-mount lenses which go straight onto these cameras. The cameras above are from the Alpha range, which is for the digital SLRs. With these adapters here, Sony LA E1 or whatever it is, you can use these on these cameras. These cameras will then talk to the lenses will talk to the camera. I think you have limited functionality with the zoom controller. But like I say, I think if you're in the game, you may well already own your own lenses, which I think you'd probably be better off getting yourself a half decent adapter, bolt your own lens on there, you'll be a lot happier. I don't think I'm overly dissing it. I'm not dissing the camera. I just don't like the, I want to say glass, but probably plastic on the front of it. I told you about the gain. Yeah, this is just showing you some of the adapters. you can get, I mean, like I say, you can spend anything on these. I've got an MTF Nikon adapter, which is what I used. Like I say, guys here sell the Metabones. A Metabone's only for Canon lenses.
They do both, don't
Do they?
they? Sure it did, yeah.
Right, okay. Yeah, so, you know, you could buy Metabones from these guys as well, or anywhere else. Picture profiles. So in the camera, there are certain looks that you can dial in. There are 9, even though it's only showing 7, there are 9 picture profiles, S-Logs, 709. There's a cine look, I think there's a DSLR look, there's a vivid look. You know, it caters for all markets. Again, they're great. I very rarely will touch picture profiles, but the times that I have, they have come in really useful. To be fair, the times that I have used them have been because the production have suggested that we use them. Again, I kind of work that I do on my camera, everything's shot standard 5. I give it to them, there's a very quick turnaround. They haven't got time to grade it, they haven't got time to manipulate the images, so it tends to be TV stuff. They take it, they use it, we move on. But they are very good. I've played around with picture profiles, not in this camera, but I think in this camera. And you know, it's very interesting that when you do play with them, there are differences to be noticed, and there is a use for all of them. You know, on a bright sunny day, you know, there is a picture profile that comes in very handy. On a overcast day, there will be one. You know, you can play around with so many of the parameters within each picture profile. Somebody asked earlier, could you name them? We don't know if anyone was thinking that. So if you want to set up your own one, certainly out of the box, it just comes up with that, which is a bit problematic. It would be better if it did give a brief description so you would know, because I spent all last night at home whilst trying to get my babies to sleep, trying to look up what each picture profile was, and I couldn't find any information, because what they don't do, which is a bit stupid and a bit sort of naive, is the picture profiles aren't the same in camera to camera to camera. Whereas you'd have thought that picture profile 1 would always be da-da-da, picture profile 2 would always be da-da-da. So, you know, I wouldn't, if you owned one of the other cameras in the range, an FS700, come to this, think, right, okay, that's what I always work from. You know, just again, have a look at it, have a play, check that it actually does what you're expecting it to do. I suppose a lot of it comes down to the fact that over time, they are going to...
Customise it.
Yeah, they're going to customise them, yeah, they're going to, you know, add extra features, they're going to push it even more. You know, like I say, you've got 14 stops of latitude in S-Log, you know, maybe that's what it's all to do with. Maybe it's to do that the ISO on this in S-Log with that 14 stops has to be 3200. It's a default. There's no other ISO you can go to. If you want to use S-Log, it's got to be 3200.
Sometimes they're like a hidden menu that they don't tell you about.
Yeah, that's...
And then rename them in there.
Yeah, and I tell you what, you notice that more on the high-end broadcast cameras than I mean, I'm sure that on these, they've got the same thing. They must have. But like I say, I'm certainly not privy to it, and they tell me very little. But I'm sure, but if you look at the next slide, it does show, you know, what each picture profile involves. You know, that's what they're made up of, you know, different bits, and you're adding and taking away. And you can then play around with these numbers a bit if you want to, you know, if you want to get your image. But again, I think I'm not a techie, you know, I don't know enough about the engineering side of images, pictures, quality. So I'd be very reluctant to touch anything, you know. Like I say, I use the picture profiles more when I'm pushed into that area rather than through choice. You know, I tend to think that I don't need to put myself through that, but they are there, and it's a good function to have on the camera. It does make the camera more versatile. Again, it's fairly self-explanatory. Another fantastic tool, which I really like about it, is the MI shoe. I think it's brilliant. For those of you that may not be aware of what it is, basically, you know, these days now I have to do my own sound quite often with radio mics. If you're using one radio mic, if you're lucky to only have one radio mic on a job, you can connect this radio mic via this straight into the camera, no cables. It talks to the camera, it's great.
that talk via the hot shoe, isn't it?
Yes, so it's an interface that's in here that, you know, you can control the levels and everything from the camera without having to, you know, have cables everywhere. You know, I think it may even get power from the camera as well. The downside of that is it's only for one radio mic, so more often than not, you'd probably want two. So that's the first slight downside with it. The other one is that there's only one hot shoe on the camera. I mean, I said it when this came out, not that anyone's bothered what I think, but when this camera came out, I said, wouldn't it have been great if they'd have put two on there?
Like they do with the FS5.
Yeah, and you
Sorry,
sort of,
F3.
yeah, but they haven't done that, and it's like they offer, you know, you can have a radio mic and you can put a light on there as well. Well, what if you want to use both? If they'd have put an MI shoe on there and one on the front, you could have a light on the front and a radio mic on the back. Just one of those things. I think they are working on a double adapter. I mean, this adapter, which I didn't realise, I thought would be £200-300, is actually 30 quid. So, I mean, I don't know how that slipped through at such a small price, but these are great radio mics. I've used them a lot, I've borrowed them a lot, I've been given them a lot. They work very well, very self-explanatory, very easy for a, you know, one-man band. Hold them together, they find a clear channel around where you're working. If there's anything else in that range, it goes above or below that. It's really, really useful tools. But I think they're working on a double one of these. I don't know how well it will work. What I didn't know and was told that the video light does still require a small battery as well as drawing power from the camera, because apparently the light and the running of the camera the battery can't work. Here's Dave from Sony, by the way. It's all good, don't worry. It's all good. I was just saying, it's amazing that adapter, Dave, is only 30 quid, really, 30, 40 quid, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, because you would think it's going to be in the 100 to...
In typical Sony fashion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think they've missed the naught off of it. So, on to some of the features and the benefits of the camera. There's a couple of things that I really like. Probably the biggest thing that I liked about this camera is the ND filter system. It's not like, well, it's like another camera that Sony do, but it's certainly not like any of these cameras' ND filters. Predominantly on cameras, the ND filter works with a clear, and then 3 levels of ND glass that go in front between the lens and the sensor by the optical pass filter. How this works is it's a LCD that steps in front, it takes a voltage, and the ND is according to how much voltage is on the LCD. Which is good. You can set the 3 positions to pretty much what you want between a quarter and 128th, so you can preset those. What you can also do, which is the bit that I would use it for, is if I put a prime lens on or a lens on, I would set my aperture on the lens, and then I would go to ND, and you can roll the ND via this window all the way through the range from a quarter to 128, which is fantastic, because what that does is that enables you to film in and out without having to touch your lens, which means your depth of field doesn't change at all, which means if you're walking with someone and you're focusing, you're not going to have any massive changes if you have to iris down. So that's a massive plus from this camera. It's the one thing that if I could take anything from this camera, put it onto mine, it would be that, because I just think that that's a fantastic tool. The amount of times I'm outside, you know, just the sun coming out, you think, oh God, I'm going to have to, you know, you think, oh, I'm in the middle of this and I haven't quite got enough on the lens, and what do I do? You know, do I just quickly do it? Or what if he says the important thing as I do it, they're going to go mad? You know, this just gets you through that problem completely. I mean, it's not new technology though, is it?
I think it was used in the NX3. So that's, what, about a year or so old?
Yeah.
It's the first time we've used it on a large format sensor.
Yeah.
And I think I said earlier, you can also control that using the hand grip. So there's a little dial where your index finger sits. Sorry.
You haven't got there yet. He's got a bad habit of doing this and then stitching me up. But being serious though, cheers Dave, it is a great tool, and it's one of those things that if you are, you know, going back to that saying, run and gun, it makes that job easier. It makes it that much more easy, you know, easier for you to do what you want, hassle-free. It's got a focus assist, and a face detection. So assist focus magnifier. You can crash in 8 times and you can just set your focus and then come back out, you know, it's sharp. The good thing about that is if you're filming an interview with someone and they're off center, via the hand grip, you can move that to wherever you want it to be in the frame. So that's a massive plus, because I thought it may be bang in the middle and you may be slightly moving the camera, coming back, reframing slightly. No, you can move that. The other massive plus about it is this face detection, which I couldn't get to work because the model I had was a pre-production model. But what it does is I can set the focus to be on your face. You can walk towards me, it will hold the focus. It's not, you know, doing that, sort of chasing it, it's bang on, it's holding it the whole way. If we walk backwards and, you know, I come in a bit and come out a bit, it will hold the focus on the face. I don't know how it does it, wrong person to ask. Dave may know the answer, or may just pull me your face, shut up, Graham. But that's one of the things. What's the other thing that you said it does very well?
From what I heard, you can sort of manually override it. So you set the, you know, for example, you and I are sat here, Graham's, shooting us. He can change the focus to from the focal plane from you to me. So he just manual override, and then it will track.
And then it will track from there. So if you were sort of doing, you know, if you were sort of doing 2 people and they were doing that, you know, you could then just manually override it, and it will pick it up. I mean, how well it works, I can't honestly say.
I've not seen it.
But the people that have used it have said it works really well, to the point that they've said it's better than they could do. It also holds the face. You know, my sort of worry would be with using it. I don't like exactly, it's that it's going to pick up someone else in the background and, you know, do that and maybe come back. I mean, I don't like automatic functions. The high-end broadcast cameras don't have them. That's possibly something you would consider using if it worked as well. Again, I'd want to test it first. But is that, and here's a question for you, Dave, is that on all lenses or is that on Sony lenses only? Do we know that?
Don't know.
Because is it a camera sensor thing, or is it a lens talking to camera thing?
I don't think it's the lens, I think it's the camera, but I couldn't say for it.
Okay, alright, cool.
I think it uses like a, you know, an algorithm that recognises the characteristics of the face and then tracks onto that, but yeah.
Okay, I'm going to say one more bit, then we'll let Rich jump in, because he's got some very valid points. Wi-Fi capable, it's got on the back, it's got a LAN port, and it's Wi-Fi, so if you want to stream live, you can do that. You don't need a computer, straight into the back of the camera. If we were filming this now and it's going to ProAV's New York office, which I want to front up, it could do that very easily. You know, it'd be fantastic. You know, it does that really well. It works on the same protocol as Teradek, so you could, you know, again, Teradek into a monitor. It would all work, pick it up very quickly. Again, it's just one of those little tools, very useful for all applications. If you've got a client that wants you to do some web streaming, something like that, this camera can do it. You don't need a laptop. Rich, jump in. I'm only saying that because we're on the S-Log bit, and it's probably a good time for you to talk about 4K, etc.
Right, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about Atomos and essentially how they can augment the workflow that you have with pretty much any camera, be it HD, 4K, DSLR, mirrorless camera, camcorder, cinema camera. We can essentially give you a whole host of tools to improve your video workflow. There's a lot of things that particularly can assist with the FS5, as we do already with the FS7. So for those of you who don't know anything about Atomos, I'll just give you a quick rundown. So essentially they're most famous for their range of external field recorders, normally camera mounted, but we have some studio and rack mounted versions as well. But in essence, we take a video feed out of the camera off the lens and the sensor. So bypassing all of the internal processes that happen within inside the camera in terms of recording and processing, things like the bit rate that's used, the codec that's used to record, maybe the color information and the sampling of the color information as well. Because all cameras inherently will compress the data to record it to the, you know, XQD cards or your SD cards or CFast or whatever the camera might be using. So cameras will normally use things like MPEG derived compressions, be it something like MPEG or AVC HD, or what ultimately is XAVC is derived from MPEG. What we do is we take the uncompressed feed from the sensor, and we then encode that in real time into an edit-ready codec, which is visually lossless to the human eye, which is either Apple's ProRes or Avid's DNX codecs. So the benefit of that is twofold. First of all, there's no visual artifacts induced into the file, but it's still a compressed video file, so it's easier to work with. But it's also edit ready, so as soon as I've finished shooting, I can take that footage out, I can dock that to any Mac or PC workstation, and I can then drop that footage straight into Final Cut, Premiere, Edius, Lightworks, Sony Vegas, whatever you might be using, or just open it within QuickTime. So the main reason that those codecs are used in editing is they're designed by the editing software manufacturers for that editing process. So they're very quick for doing color grading. It's an all intra-frame codec, so whereas, as Graham was saying on the FS7, that can record an intra-frame compression, which means every single frame is compressed on its own, whereas the FS5 is using long GOP compression, so you've only got a few singly compressed frames within your, say, 25 frame sequence, and it's using predictive compression to essentially fill in the blanks of what changed. And that's one of the points where you start to get some artifacts. But also from a workflow perspective, when you say work in an editing software package, when you're working with a long GOP, the computer has to basically decode that compression. If you want to change a color in a frame or across an image, it basically has to then render all of that by looking at all these other frames and piecing the video file back together. With ProRes and DNX, it doesn't have to do that, but it's an optimized codec. But it's also a much higher bit rate. So at the highest quality in HD, we're actually at 220 megabits per second, so nearly 5 times the broadcast spec. And in 4K, we're at basically 4 times that, so we're at sort of around 880 megabits per second. So it's very, very high. So initially, we're giving you a much improved recording quality and kind of workflow within post-production. The other advantage is what we record to. So we record to what we call a master caddy. Now in here is essentially, if I just take this apart, is a 2.5-inch solid state drive or hard disk drive. So this is massively reducing the cost of your media. So rather than having to buy very expensive sort of proprietary media that's essentially designed just for cameras, this is what's used in laptops, mobile devices, data centers. It's used in millions of devices all around the world. So it's much cheaper and a much higher capacity. So like a 512 gig SSD will give you 13 hours of 100 megabit HD recording, or say 5.5 hours worth of recording at 220 megabit, or for 4K you're talking about an hour and a half for 880 megabit HD, 4K, or around at 400 megabits 4K, you're talking about over 3 hours still. So it's long record times, and that's probably about £190. So it's
it's less than that now. I bought some the other day for £80.
Yeah, exactly. You can buy. With SSDs, we essentially Atomos have a compatibility list of, because we don't make our own media, we have a non-proprietary approach, which again helps drive down the cost of media, but also make it widely available, because you don't have to buy ours if you can go anywhere and buy a SanDisk or an Intel approved drive. What we say is that to use a higher caliber of drive, you have a much higher endurance value. So if you are shooting every day, or on average, say you shoot 3 or 4 days a week, you shoot on average, say 5 or 6 hours a day, we would say that, over the course of a year, your £80 SSD is probably going to get to the end of its useful lifespan and it'll die. Or just, you kind of lose performance or lose reliability. The slightly more expensive ones, they're designed that you can basically fill them and erase them, fill them and erase them every day, day in, day out for 5 years, and you're going to be absolutely fine. So the media is much, much cheaper, and certainly for HD workflows, which ultimately even people buying 4K cameras now, the bulk of your workflow is still HD, as Graham was alluding to earlier, because that's where the market demand is. People that are shooting 4K, it's either for archive purposes down the line, for repurposing, or it's for the fact that you might want to do something in post that involves a very dramatic zoom, or you maybe want to crop out a 4K, an HD image from a 4K.
We actually film 4K every week for BT Sport. We do the Premier League games and the Champions League games in 4K, but I have no idea where that goes. I've no idea. Timeline, they're the facilities company. We do it every week. They have massive problems every week. but I've no idea. I mean, just saying about, you know, I just suddenly thought we'd do it every week, but it's an OB. I think a lot of that's to archive because it's Champions League, because everybody watches it in HD. You know, it's like 3D. 3D was massively pushed for a year, 2 years.
To sell you a new TV.
Yeah, I mean, and well, I think without being unfair, I mean, it, you know, it all comes around, you know, I mean, it is with that in mind, you know. I mean, I think the quality difference is massive, but, you know, I sit at home, as probably all of you do, I'll be watching BBC One, and then my wife will say, oh, what if it's on HD? And you go down, oh, it is on HD, but nothing that I was watching in, you know, pre that, you know, on the BBC One channel made me think, oh, I needed to go to HD. So again, I don't believe that there's a massive call at the moment to jump to 4K. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's actually the private sector of what, certainly what we're seeing is it's actually private corporate consumption of video that's actually pushing more into shooting and actually purposefully displaying 4K because, you know, they've all got closed channels to delivering that content, whether it be 4K TVs or projectors in their foyers and receptions or seminars or corporate events. Because they can show it, they want to film it. But obviously from a broadcasting point of view, bar Netflix now, who have a few programs that you can watch in 4K, and you know that will come in time, but it's going to be quite slow. So you know at the moment the bulk is HD. So hard disk drives we can support for HD. You know you're talking £60-70 media that will record for over 10.5 hours of 220 megabit, or you know talking 23 hours of 100 megabit content. So you get a very low cost of media, which is why we essentially call this a master caddy, because it's cheap enough that you can actually put it on the shelf at the end of a shoot and not go, oh my God, that cost me £500. I've got to erase it and put it back in the camera immediately. So it's giving you that kind of ability. So in direct relation really to things like the FS5, our 7-inch models which support 4K and HD workflows. We have two models, this one which is called the Ninja Assassin, which is an HDMI in and out, so perfectly compatible with the FS5. We also have a model called the Shogun, which then on the back has SDI in and out as well as the HDMI, so you've got both connectivity types. So for example, the Shogun model is quite popular with the FS7 because you could use it with an extension pack to take SDI raw out of it, or if you just have the bog standard FS7 body, we can still take a 4K UHD image out of the FS7 and record that into ProRes or DNX codecs onto our product. As well as being a recorder, we're also a monitor. So we're a 7.1 inch full HD. So we run a resolution of 1920 by 1200. 1200 basically enables us to put a lot of our UI at the bottom, giving us the uncropped 1080.
Can I just jump in a second there? I'll tell you the other thing that I like about it is it's also a good monitor. Yeah. You know, I mean, you're not spending a lot less than that on a monitor anyway, you know, and like I say, it's not a plug. I'm just saying, you know, for me, it's a great sized monitor to actually have in the field anyway. If you can record separately to that, then fantastic, you know.
So really what Atomos have tried to do is give users multiple tools into one device. So rather than having to buy a monitor, buy a recorder, buy an audio recorder, buy, you know, a device to play back on, and, you know, essentially Atomos are giving you all of that. So we're a video recorder, we're a multi-channel audio recorder, so we can take up to 8 channels of audio embedded on HDMI. We can take up to 12 channels of embedded audio on SDI. And we also have an analog input, which on the Assassin is an unbalanced line level input. On the Shogun, we have a LEMO breakout cable to XLRs, so you can have line level, mic level, balanced pro level. Mics we can provide phantom power to as well. So, you know, essentially it can replace your audio recorder. You've got individual gain controls on both the channels as well. You can trim that while you're recording. It's all 48K 24-bit recording as well, so it's all nicely broadcast spec. And we take timecode embedded in as well. So we can take timecode and video and audio and camera start-stop triggers all through HDMI and the same through SDI. On the Shogun, we do also then have a separate input for Genlock on playout or for LTC timecode input during record. So if you were, say, shooting with an FS5, which doesn't have its own timecode inputs, if you're doing a multicam shoot, you can actually then have a timecode source generator feeding into all of our Shogun recorders, stick those on there, and that's how you can then sync everything up very, very quickly. Likewise, if you do have a separate audio recorder already, you can take an audio feed in to hear from that, and basically you're recording a guide track on here. So again, syncing up external audio sources to, you know, camera recordings which don't have that kind of capability to sync the audio recorder or vice versa. It's very, very easy to do. In terms of monitoring, we then give you all the monitoring tools you'd normally expect. We have things like focus peaking, again with a multitude of colours. So you can have white, green, red, blue, yellow, turquoise, purple, whatever you want. We also enable you to monochrome the image, so you're only looking at the peaking colour as well. Or we can actually go to an outline only mode if you're stood back from a camera, so you can actually see your focus point purely as just the outline only. We also have things like zebras adjustable from 50 to 105%, false colour, blue only. We then have grid frames, so we can show you grid frames for lots of different aspect ratios, like 16:9, 2.4, 2.35, 1.9, 1.85, 4:3. So if you're doing anything specifically for, say, tablet, iPad content, for example, it's a 4:3 aspect ratio. You can obviously see where your frame guides are going to be. And we also then do optional guides for safety zones and for title safe markers as well. So you can kind of mix and match what you basically want to look at from that. We also then have waveform monitoring. So you've got a luma in there. That can be a quarter, a third, or a full screen. And we can change things like the translucency and brightness of everything. So if you are looking at it as an overlay, then in the corner you can just drop it away to be kind of unobtrusive to the image. RGB parade in there, and the vector scope as well. We do a zoom on the vector scope. So all of the tools you'd always want in a normal monitor, we've got on here. The other thing that's quite important to mention is that out the box, the screens in our 5-inch and 7.1-inch products are Rec 709 calibrated. So you know that they're color accurate. So if you're looking at the viewfinder and you're looking at this, you know that the colors on here are the ones to trust. We also have 3D LUT support on here. So kind of going back to, again, what Graham was saying about the FS7, one of the best things about that when you're shooting log is the fact that you can then apply a LUT and see what it will look like when it's going to be edited in a Rec 709 space, for example. What we can do is we have some standard LUTs. We actually have 8 banks inside the unit that you can save LUTs to. So we give you some built-in ones for things like S-Log, and we support Canon and V-Log and etc, etc. But also we give you the ability to load your own LUTs on there. So any .cube file, if there's a certain look that you're going to work with for a client or for a job, you can basically export that from your grading software or NLE, load it into here via the drive, save it into one of the 8 banks, and then you can recall that at any point. What we can do is we can give you a split screen view or a full screen view of the LUT, so you can look at a half graded and a half ungraded image. So certainly in the case of the FS5, which doesn't have LUT support, as Graham was saying, when you go into the S-Log, you've got all the extra steps of dynamic range. You've got 14 steps versus 8? Six. Yeah, so you've got a lot more dynamic range in there, but you're always going to be a bit like, oh my God, am I getting this right or not? So we can essentially show you, you can record log, but you can actually apply and monitor and gauge how you're setting the camera based on what it looks, say, in a Rec 709 or with a specific grade for a job applied. We do also give the ability to burn in that grade as well. So we have an option to actually physically record the LUT burnt into the ProRes or DNX file. We give you a nice warning flashing red icon with the LUT to show you that you're going to be committing that. But say you're doing a job where you want to have the extra stops of dynamic range, for example, for filming, but you're not going to have time to grade it, or the client doesn't have the budget to pay for a colorist to spend any time on it. So you can essentially put the camera into log and actually just physically put on here, S-Log, Rec 709, and then just view that and select to burn it in, and then you can work within what you're looking at on here as well.
Which I would personally be a lot happier doing, because I think then you're a lot more confident at the time. Like I say, the days that I've done S-Log shoots, I've just spent the previous days worrying about it, the shoot worrying about it, the next 4 or 5 weeks worrying about it.
Yeah, and likewise, if you've been asked to shoot log, but so you're going to record log on here, but you can then just monitor it as the Rec 709. Again, use a smaller handheld run and gun camera to do that, rather than having to use a bigger, heavier, maybe less ergonomic for the type of shoot project. So as well as doing kind of all the monitoring,
also as a B camera.
Yes, well, exactly. So if you are using an F5 or an FS7 or something as your main camera, and you've got a few B cameras or one B camera. With that, it's easier to match up the footage between the two, because obviously on that you can see what the LUT looks like, on that you can't, so you can put it on there and make sure that everyone's happy. All of our products also have an output, so you can loop out to a producer direct to monitor from all of our units. And likewise on the 7-inch models with the LUTs, we can actually output the LUT as well. So, you know, if you're looking at a nice graded image, but you've got a director that doesn't quite understand what S-Log is, as often the case is.
But likes the word.
But likes the word because they're told it's better. You know, you can then show them what that looks like as well. We're also a playback device, so as you can see here, I'm just playing back a footage. You've got full transport controls, you can instantaneously jump to any point of the clip. You've got frame by frame nudging. We also in the monitoring give you zoom capabilities on our 7-inch models as well. So this is a 4K recorder, but it's only an HD screen, so we're not looking pixel to pixel. I can do a pixel to pixel zoom, and I can pan around that either in the screen or in the navigation. We can also then do a 2:1 zoom as well. Same thing, I can pan around, can pause it, and you've got frame by frame nudging, fast forward, rewind, etc. We also give you metadata tagging in playback or in record, so we can actually add metadata to our footage like favorite or reject sections. You know, put a note in for talent. Maybe you've got, you know, leading lady and, you know, your leading star. You know, or maybe you hear some bad audio, or you see that actually this is overexposed, or this is going to need some color correction, not grading, but just correction. I can actually mark in that while I'm shooting, or I can come back into playback and add all this logging data. So as well as giving you an edit-ready piece of footage that's lossless from the camera, we're also giving you a lot of tools that hopefully when you get back to post, mean that half your job's kind of done for you already. So you know where your good bits are, you know your favorite clips, your reject clips, and maybe what we also give you the ability to mark, say, a close-up shot, a wide shot, you know, cut away. So again, you can just start putting that marker information in to speed everything up. And it's just an XML export. It actually will go seamlessly straight into Final Cut 10, very, very well, and they use a very intelligent favorite and reject section that integrates perfectly with this. Into Avid, you just have to go via translation because it can't directly import XML. And into into Premiere and other applications, it will just be like keyword metadata across your timeline.
Don't underestimate it, like I keep saying, as a monitor as well. I mean, that for me is the massive thing. I mean, you know, it's £1,000 monitor as well.
Exactly. And also we have a compatibility with an accessory called Spider, which is made by Datacolor. So if you already have a Datacolor Spider, you can just buy a cable from us and download our software for free. Or you can buy the Spider through Atomos, and it comes with everything you need. But basically it's a little device you can just sit on the screen, as long as it's on a surface where it's not going to slide around. You just plug it into your Mac or PC. You just need 2 available USB ports, one for the Spider and one for a cable to come back into our serial port. And basically it takes about 4 or 5 minutes. It will just analyse the screen, because all monitors will drift over time. It's just most monitor manufacturers don't really like to draw your attention to it if they're field ones, because they're not easy to calibrate. But this can be done in the field, takes about 4 or 5 minutes, and it will just analyse the screen and upload a new profile, and you know you're bang back on the Rec 709 standard again. So it's a monitor that you know you can trust ongoing basis if you're using the Spider with it as well. We can also do some nice stuff like pre-roll record. So whereas some of the entry-level cameras don't have such things, we can do a rolling 8-second cache record in HD, or it's about 2 to 3 seconds in 4K depending on the level of the codec that you're using. So again, for any live events, particularly with 4K, where you know it does chomp through a lot more storage space quicker. If you're waiting for something to happen, you don't have to keep filming. You've got that rolling buffer that as long as you're paying attention, hit record and you're going to catch that. We also have time-lapse recording on here now. So in time-lapse, we can essentially configure everything on a sequence basis. So per sequence, you can say how many frames, seconds, minutes or hours you want to capture, how often you want to do that, again on the same values, and for a total duration of, again, any of those values you choose. But it's not just one sequence like you can have in most time-lapse environments. We can actually create up to 10, which can either run in sequence and then stop, they can run in reverse, they can run in sequence and then repeat and reverse. You know, you've got lots of different options of how it works. So you can actually be quite creative about shooting time-lapse that increases in density or duration, etc. But we also give you some other tools around that, like smooth transitions. So a lot of time-lapse can look really choppy because of the nature of what time-lapse is. So we can actually do a smooth transition between the key frames of each time-lapse section just to smooth it out. Or if you're actually looking for a specific post-production effect, we can actually apply a motion blur on the basis of each sequence. So it's a simple option per sequence, which applies a motion blur. And it looks very nice. I've got some examples of just a freeway shot in LA, but it just very, very effortlessly, you can hit record on time-lapse, take the footage out, and it already looks post-produced. You know, you can have applied a LUT to it already. So again, for kind of any live or corporate events, it's very nice just to film stuff going on. As soon as the event's finished, you've basically got some rendered time-lapse ready to go, which is all quite neat in there. And that's pretty much about it, really. So,
brilliant. It's not over yet. You're not getting out of here just yet. So a couple more things, or a few more things with this camera, the FS5. Talk about center crop mode. There is an assignable button on the camera that you can set so that we can effectively go from the full Super 35 to a Super 16. So we just crop the image 50%. It's only in HD, not in Quad HD, but is capable. So if you were, I don't know, on a shoot, you desperately need to get a little bit more out of your lens, you can just crop the image, it'll be there. I think it'll work very well. I think probably under engineering viewing, you'd probably notice a small difference, but I don't think it'd be too bad. I think you would get, you know, a good image out of it. I haven't seen it, so I can't really comment on it, but it's just another function on the camera that's not on the other cameras. Clear image zoom, something I like about this a lot. If you choose to put on a prime lens, it's no longer a prime lens with this camera, and if you can see, there's a 50mm prime on there. If I focus up, it might help. It turns this prime lens into a zoom. It's not a digital zoom, so it's not like on your iPhone when you whack it in and it goes all crappy and horrible. This has got a processor inside that analyses the image that it's looking at. It works out the sharp edges, the soft edges, and it puts in the amount of correction that it requires to make that image zoom in and keep everything looking usable. So again, it's something that's, you know, with the variables ND, I think it's a great tool, something that I like a lot. Probably after the ND would be the second thing I'd like on my F5, because, you know, the amount of times I'm using a prime lens and you just need that little bit more, you know, someone takes a step back, someone pushes you back a bit, you think, oh, I just want a little bit more. This will give it to you. Have a look at it, because it's well worth looking at. It works seamlessly. We mentioned streaming live from the camera. Back of the camera, HD SDI output. There's no time code in or out on this camera. Again, it's a price point thing, I think. It's nothing, you know, too bad with the camera, but it is something you need to be aware of. You could be put off by that, and I thought, oh, that's a bit rubbish, not too good. But like I said before, my second camera on most of my jobs is a DSLR. It doesn't have that function either. And this is a far better camera than my DSLR will ever be. You know, certainly in terms of me satisfying my clients, they'll be more happy with the footage that comes out of this than the DSLR, because whenever I do jobs, they always say, oh, is there something wrong with the second camera? And you think, well, no, it's, you know, it's a DSLR. It's not an F5. You know, it's not the same camera. This is going to give me images that are closer, more usable. HDMI connector at the moment, that is how you'd probably get to your 4K being in one of these devices. Doesn't work at the moment, but that's a software thing that's coming, isn't it?
On the cameras and stuff. Yeah, so it, when you hit record, if you're recording 4K, it won't out.
Yeah, it won't output to that. So just something to be aware of, but that I'm sure is going to be a fix coming not too far. That's your Ethernet port there. 2 audio inputs. It's only got 2 audio channels. That's something that may be an issue. If you were desperate for time code, you could always put time code down one of those audio channels, but as you've only got 2, you'd probably be unlikely to use it that way.
So the 4K out fix, that's in software?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, it's not asking okay, well, we're doing fine. Before you go, we'll go 5 minutes.
So, comparison of the 2 cameras. Well, I think if you are looking for high-end 4K usable camera, everyday use, then you're going to go with the FS7. A second camera, you're not looking for DCI 4K, then this is the camera for you. It has got its limitations. I've gone through those. They're not major obstacles. They're just things that you need to be aware of. Like I say, S-Log will be the one, because S-Log will be the one that everybody wants to use on it, because everyone will see that it's got 14 stops of dynamic range. If you go with that, I would just suggest that, oh, I've lost my mic, I think. If you go with that, I would just suggest that you learn how to use the camera. Don't just think you're going to take it out of the box, put it to S-Log, point and shoot. You'll have problems, unless you're very lucky. So it's just one of those things that you need to be aware of. Like I just said, that has time code in and out. That may or may not be a problem. If it's a B camera, it's a slight problem. It's not the end of the world. Certainly if in Final Cut Pro now, it doesn't even need time code. It'll go by the audio tracks. It will sync them up from that. So certainly it's not the end of the world. And like I say, the cameras that I've been using as a second camera don't have any time code in and out either. So that's not a major problem. So guys, I'm looking at the time. It's 4 o'clock. I would suggest that you have a little play with them, have a look at them, have a look at that one. If you've got any questions, do fire them my way. If they're more salesy, techie questions, maybe ask the boy. Yeah, see someone that's left. If they're general questions about how I found it, then by all means fire it my way. I thoroughly enjoyed the camera, I'll be honest, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would definitely buy one as a second camera. I've got to convince the wife, but I would definitely buy one as a second camera. It cause or solve a lot of problems for me. It would probably add so much more to my B-roll footage that at £3,000, and as much as it's not a small amount of money, it's not the end of the world. I'm going to make that money back, because if they ask me to start hiring in a second camera, they'll expect one of those. If I turn up with one of these, they'll never know the difference. And that's probably the best way I can put it. Cheers, guys. Thank you. Sorry if it went on a bit.